All right, so buckle up, everyone, because today we are diving headfirst into a conspiracy theory that's, well, it's captivating for sure, but also kind of unsettling.
Definitely intriguing.
Yeah, we're talking about the theory that Freemasons are secretly orchestrating a global doomsday event.
Oh, yeah. You sent some really interesting articles and research my way about this. So I
I've
think,
unpacked it.
yeah, let's totally unpack it.
Yeah.
What really struck me is how this theory, how it weaves together all the symbolism and historical events and like our anxieties right now into this like really compelling narrative.
It's scary.
Yeah, it is. And it's not just about some far off, end of the world. It's like it's happening now.
It's happening now.
It's in motion.
Yeah, and it gets even creepier when you consider who the supposed masterminds are, right?
Freemasons.
The Freemasons, this super old and secretive organization known for their rituals and symbols and their closed-door meetings. I mean, they're almost asking for conspiracy theories.
It's like they're begging for it,
Right.
right? Like all that mystery just fuels speculation.
Totally.
But let's, break down what this particular theory actually claims
Yeah.
at its core.
Yeah.
The theory alleges that the Freemasons are working towards a deliberate doomsday scenario.
Okay.
And we're not just talking like vague end-of-the-world prophecies. This is calculated. We're talking engineered pandemics, orchestrated wars, economic collapse, like the downfall of everything.
Like the whole shebang.
the whole kit and caboodle.
It's giving major global elites are pulling the strings vibes.
Oh, yeah.
And speaking of elites,
Oh, here we go.
let's not forget about the New World Order.
That's the juicy part, right? This is where it gets wild.
That's where it gets really interesting.
The theory basically says that all this manufactured chaos, it's not an end in itself. It's a means to an end.
Okay.
The goal is to establish a totalitarian global government, a new world order,
A New World Order.
controlled by, you guessed it, the Freemason elite.
The Freemasons.
They use their power, their influence to manipulate world events.
Oh, it's all coming together.
So we've got the who and the what. Now let's talk about the how. This theory relies a lot on interpreting Masonic symbols and rituals, right? As evidence.
Oh, absolutely. Proponents will often point to symbols like the all-seeing eye on the dollar bill, you know the one?
Oh, I've seen this.
Or the compass and the square, claiming that they're like hidden messages about this grand scheme.
Okay.
Like, for example, one article you highlighted talks about how these conspiracy theorists interpret the pyramid on the dollar bill as a symbol of the Freemasons' power structure.
The pyramid.
Yeah, and the unfinished top, right, represents their goal of this unfinished New World Order.
Whoa. It's like they're playing this giant game of symbolic charades, and only these conspiracy theorists have the key.
They have all the answers.
But are these interpretations even valid? Can't symbols have multiple meanings?
That's the thing. While the conspiracy theory assigns these sinister meanings to Masonic symbols, they often have completely different interpretations within actual Freemasonry. So the all-seeing eye, for example, it's often seen as representing a higher power, divine guidance, emphasizing moral and spiritual principles.
Okay.
And the compass and square, far from being tools of manipulation, they actually symbolize moral uprightness and living a balanced life.
So it's less about secret codes and more about misunderstanding what these symbols actually mean.
Pretty much, context is key.
Okay, that makes sense. But what about the rituals? Those seem to play a big part in this theory as well.
You're right. The theory focuses on these oaths and initiation ceremonies that Freemasons have, claiming they bind members to this whole apocalyptic agenda.
Oh, wow.
And of course, the secrecy just adds fuel to the fire.
Right, because if you don't know what's going on,
It's all suspicious.
you just assume the worst.
Exactly.
One of the research papers I sent you talks about how conspiracy theorists see these oaths as pledges of allegiance to this doomsday plan.
It's a big leap, though, isn't it?
It's a huge leap, taking a pledge of brotherhood and twisting it into
I vow to end the world.
Yeah. Is there any evidence to suggest that these rituals are anything other than what the Freemasons claim them to be?
Here's the interesting thing. While Freemasons are super private about their ceremonies, there is a ton of historical and scholarly research that sheds light on their actual meaning.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and when you take away that conspiracy theory lens these rituals, they're often rooted in symbolism about self-improvement, ethical conduct, brotherly love.
Okay.
It's about personal growth, not world domination.
Personal growth, that makes more sense.
Way more sense.
Okay, so the symbols and rituals aren't exactly screaming doomsday.
No, not really.
But if the Freemasons aren't openly marching us towards the apocalypse,
Right.
How does this theory explain their supposed influence?
That's where this whole idea of the hidden hand comes in.
Yeah, the hidden hand. Okay.
Classic conspiracy trope, right? Powerful figures working behind the scenes, manipulating everything. This theory suggests that Freemasons, through their secret networks and their influential positions in government corporations' media, are like subtly steering the world towards their desired outcome.
Like puppet masters.
It's a chilling thought, right? Imagining this web of influence extending across society, quietly orchestrating things to bring about their doomsday scenario.
It's very scary.
You marked a passage in one of the articles that claimed
Oh, yeah. I remember it said
that.
specific example from source material.
Yeah, and that really plays into this whole hidden hand narrative, doesn't it?
It totally does. It's such a powerful image, you know, like one that taps into these deep anxieties about like power and control and like unseen forces that shape our world.
Oh, yeah.
But like, how realistic is this scenario? Could any group, even one as old and interconnected as the Freemasons, really wield that much influence over world events?
That's the question, isn't it?
It is, and that's what we're going to be digging into next.
Ooh,
We'll examine how plausible this hidden hand theory is
very interesting.
and explore how it connects to the Freemasons' alleged efforts to dismantle society as we know it. Stay tuned.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about this whole thing with the Freemasons as this hidden hand, like guiding global events towards doomsday.
It's a really cool idea.
Yeah, it is a cool idea.
But it does make you wonder, like, how far that influence can really go.
Yeah, it raises some serious questions about the limits of like influence and control.
It really does. It sounds like a spy movie, you know?
Totally.
But then when you really think about it, the idea that any group, even one as connected as the Freemasons,
Right.
could manipulate everything to that extent, it seems a little far-fetched, doesn't it?
It does. The world is just so complex. There are so many things that influence political and economic and social trends.
Yeah.
To say that one organization could orchestrate something as big as a global doomsday scenario,
Right.
it's like you really have to suspend your disbelief.
Yeah, but what about that claim that Freemasons are in all these positions of power?
Yes.
If they have members in governments and corporations and media outlets,
Sure.
couldn't that give them some leverage?
Well, yeah, that's a point that conspiracy theorists love to bring up.
Right.
Like you highlighted a passage in one of your sources
I did.
that really debunks this idea.
Oh, yeah.
It pointed out that just because some Freemasons might be in prominent positions, it doesn't mean they're all working together to, steer the world towards some predetermined outcome.
Right.
People are individuals, even if they're in the same organization.
Of course.
So attributing like a single agenda to a whole group based just on membership, it's just not logical.
Yeah, it's like assuming that everyone in a book club is secretly controlling the publishing industry.
Exactly. It's just been a bit of a stretch. But let's say for the sake of argument
Okay.
that some Freemasons, Dio, want to bring about this new world order.
Okay.
Could they realistically achieve that through like subtle influence, even if they can't control everything directly?
It's a good question.
It is. See, it's one thing to say that people with shared beliefs might, end up in certain professions or positions of power.
Right.
It's a completely different thing to claim that they can like orchestrate this global transformation from those positions on the scale that this theory suggests.
Yeah, like how would that even work?
Exactly. The world is just too unpredictable, There are way too many competing interests. Too many things you can't foresee.
Yeah, you can't plan for everything.
Even the most cunning plan couldn't unfold that perfectly.
So maybe the hidden hand theory, while it is exciting,
It is exciting.
maybe it's giving the Freemasons a little too much credit.
I tend to think so, but it's still important to try and understand why this idea appeals to people.
That's a good point.
It goes beyond the Freemasons, It's about humans and like our need to make sense of a world that often feels really chaotic and unpredictable.
That's true. The world can feel pretty chaotic.
Like sometimes attributing events to a secret group.
Even a bad one.
Even a bad one, like a group with a doomsday agenda, can actually make people feel better.
Okay, I see what you mean. Like at least someone's in charge.
Exactly. It's about finding a narrative.
Even if it's not true.
Even if it's unlikely, that gives you some feeling of control,
Yeah.
And this particular theory, with these ancient Freemasons pulling the strings.
It's a good story.
It is.
It plays into those fears perfectly.
It does, and it also plays into some very real anxieties about how society is changing, doesn't it?
You mentioned that
Earlier.
that this theory connects to the idea that the Freemasons are trying to, like, dismantle existing structures.
Dismantle everything.
Yeah, to make way for their new world order.
Yeah, like their perfect world.
You mentioned something in one of the articles about
Yeah, that section.
how the push for secularism and globalization is evidence of this.
Oh, yeah, definitely. It's presented as this, like, insidious plot to weaken societies from within.
So they could take over.
It's fascinating because,
Yeah.
you see those same anxieties about globalization and traditional values, like, everywhere,
In the news.
all over.
All the time.
Doesn't matter what side you're on.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
It really shows how effective this theory is at tapping into real concerns.
Because it is happening.
It is happening. Whether or not those concerns are actually justified is another discussion.
Right.
But the fact that these anxieties exist makes this theory even more powerful for people who already feel like things are changing too fast.
So it's like this theory offers like a scapegoat.
Mm-hmm.
You can blame them.
Totally. Instead of trying to understand complex geopolitical forces.
Right, or like how cultures change.
Yeah, it's way easier to just blame some shadowy group with a bad agenda.
Yeah.
It makes things simpler.
It makes you feel better.
And it gives you someone to blame.
So we've talked about the symbols, the hidden hand, and this idea of dismantling society.
Uh-huh.
But there's another part of this theory we haven't gotten to yet, which is numerology and prophecy.
Oh, yeah.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Things get a little more esoteric here.
It does. Proponents will point to dates, numbers, events, and interpret them through numerology and prophecy as evidence of the Freemasons' plan.
Yeah.
I've always been fascinated by that part of conspiracy theories.
Me too.
Like how they mix historical facts with symbols and beliefs.
It's so creative.
Do you have any examples of how they use numerology in this theory?
Sure. Remember that documentary you mentioned about the Georgia Guidestones?
Oh, yeah.
Conspiracy theorists love that one.
They do.
They use it as evidence of this Masonic plot to, like, control the world's population.
Oh, wow.
They point to that inscription on the monument, the one that says to keep humanity under 500 million people.
Yeah.
As, like, proof of the Freemasons' plan to depopulate the planet.
It's creepy.
And the fact that nobody knows who made the Guidestones.
Right. It's a mystery.
It just adds to the whole mystery.
Yeah, it does seem like a stretch to make those connections.
Yeah, you got to do a lot of mental gymnastics.
But I guess I can see how it could be persuasive to someone who already believes in these kinds of things.
Oh, for sure. The problem is that these interpretations, they rely on, like, a very specific reading of history.
Okay.
And they see patterns that might not even be there.
They fit the facts to the theory.
Yeah, instead of letting the facts speak for themselves.
So bottom line, is there any real evidence for this theory?
That's what we're going to explore next.
Okay.
We're going to look at the so-called evidence,
Right.
examine why people still believe in this theory even though there's no proof,
Right.
and we'll look at what the Freemasons themselves have to say about these accusations.
Okay, don't go anywhere. Okay, so we're back, and let's just get straight to the point. Does any real evidence actually support this theory?
Right. We've talked about the symbols and the secret societies and the prophecies. It's all very, like, intriguing and mysterious, but
But is there anything concrete to back it up?
that's the question.
Yeah.
And the short answer is not really.
So you're saying it's more about, like, connecting the dots in a way that fits the narrative rather than actually having proof.
Yeah, pretty much. It's like taking all these different pieces of information, sometimes out of context, and, like, weaving them together to tell a story that just confirms what people already believe or are afraid of.
And one of the articles you sent me actually breaks down some of these common pieces of so-called evidence that proponents of this theory like to use.
Oh, yeah.
Like, for example, it points out that the claim that Freemasons were behind the French Revolution is based on a misinterpretation of historical events and the role of certain people.
Oh, yeah. That's a classic example of how this theory works. They take a tiny bit of truth.
Okay.
Like, yeah, okay, maybe some Freemasons were involved in revolutionary movements,
Right.
but then they blow it up into this huge conspiracy without looking at the bigger picture or why those people were actually involved.
So they're jumping to conclusions.
Huge leap in logic, and it makes the whole theory less credible.
Okay, so if the evidence is so weak, why does this theory still exist? Why do people believe it?
That's a really interesting question, and it goes beyond just this one theory.
Okay.
It's about why people believe in conspiracy theories in general. I think they offer a sense of order in a world that's often really confusing and unpredictable.
Yeah.
Like knowing something that other people don't, or having some control when things feel out of control.
So it's like choosing a comforting lie over a complicated and scary truth.
Kind of, yeah. It's easier to believe in a big plan, even a bad one,
Right.
than to just accept that life is random and unpredictable. Conspiracy theories give you a framework, a story that makes things make sense, even if it's not true.
And in this case, with the Freemasons and their long history and their secrets
Right.
and all their symbols,
Yeah.
they make the perfect villain for this story.
They totally embodied that image of the shadowy group pulling the strings behind the scenes. Plus, they've always been associated with power and influence, so that just adds to it.
But haven't the Freemasons tried to address these accusations? Like, haven't they said something?
They have. Officially, the Freemasons say they're just a fraternal organization
Okay.
focused on personal development and ethical conduct and charitable work. They deny being involved in any doomsday plots or anything like that.
But they're so secretive, it's no wonder people don't believe them.
That's the problem they face, right? Their traditions and their rituals, which are important to them,
Yeah.
also make them look suspicious and fuel the speculation they're trying to stop.
It's like a catch-22.
Exactly. It's a tough spot to be in.
It makes you wonder if there's anything they can do to be more transparent without giving up their traditions.
It would be a tough balance for sure. Maybe if they educated the public more about their history and their values and what their rituals really mean, it could help clear up some of the misconceptions.
But that would mean changing how they approach secrecy.
For sure. And who knows if they'd be willing to do that. But until then, it's up to us to be critical thinkers, you know? We have to look at these claims with a healthy dose of skepticism and look for information from sources we can trust.
So where does all this leave us?
Yeah.
What have we learned from our deep dive into this Masonic Doomsday conspiracy theory?
Well, I think it shows how important critical thinking is and media literacy, you know?
Especially these days.
Especially these days with so much information coming at us all the time.
Right.
We have to be able to tell what's true and what's not, what's real evidence and what's just speculation.
We have to question our sources, look at things from different angles, and be careful about believing things that just fit our biases or our fears.
Exactly. And we have to remember that the world is complicated. And simple explanations for complicated things are usually not right.
Yeah, it's tempting to want those simple answers,
Very tempting.
but sometimes they come at a cost.
This deep dive has really made me think about how much we crave certainty and explanations.
Yeah, mate.
And how that can lead us down these rabbit holes of misinformation.
It's a good reminder that we all need to be careful about what information we consume. Be wary of easy answers and have real conversations about the things that are happening in the world.
Well said.
Well, on that note, I think we'll wrap up our exploration of this Masonic Doomsday conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Fascinating stuff, even if it's not true.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
And remember, stay curious, stay skeptical, and always keep searching for the truth.